Oh, I miss football. That intro is just an excuse for Derek Taylor and myself, Marshall Ferguson, to hear us not calling games, but calling games with fans cheering in the background. Right? It's the best. It is incredible. The best. We both miss it so much. Welcome to the breakdown. As always, it is at DTonSC alongside myself at TSN_Marshall. We are very thankful to have you here along for the ride with us as we are brought to you by our friends at Fox 40. The Fox 40 close vicinity line is designed to help you return to play safely, which we are looking forward to very much these days. For 15% off all your whistle needs, visit fox40shop.com and enter the code CFP15. I've been an emotional wreck over the last week because I don't know what to think. I don't know what's real, what's not. I see things about seasons absolutely being played, seasons not being played, the fact that we might get in 3 seasons before there's anything to do with the XFL, the idea that vaccines are going great, and then I see another story. Vaccines aren't going great, especially in important areas of the country. And hey, maybe the government doesn't want the vaccine rollout to go that fast because they're actually leeching money off. I'm like, man, I just want to watch football, DT. That's what I want.
What? You don't want the announcement we had in Regina on Tuesday, whereby we're shutting a lot of stuff down. Maybe we should have shut it down before, but we're doing it now. So if you wanted to eat in a restaurant for springtime, you can't do it.
Did you guys go back into some more like restrict? Because I've been buried. Yeah. I'll be honest with you. I've been so buried in everything CFP and in the CFL draft prep over this week specifically, like the last 5-6 days. I was supposed to be on the TSN Racing podcast. It's one of my favorite shows of the year. I was supposed to go on the TSN, with my buddy Tim Harani, and I was supposed to be doing the Drive to Survive Season 3 recap with him, which you'll learn this if you don't already know listening to this podcast and CFP. I'm obsessed with F1. Like, I've loved it since I was a little tiny kid, and it's better than ever for me right now. And so I was so excited to do that. But he turned 6 months old today. Happy birthday, Noah. But I have a 6-month-old and I have this CFP thing and I've got the CFL draft, which you can't be negligent with that because that's talking about people's futures. So I put in so much work in that. I have no idea what is happening down the street from me, what's happening in Regina, what's happening in Europe. It's all the same to me. I feel so out of touch right now with everything. So did you guys go behind some sort of more lockdowns that came back in?
Yeah, Tuesday they announced that restaurants which were open to a certain amount of capacity now can only be takeout. And you know how a week or two ago we told you could combine households up to 10 people? You cannot do that anymore. Stop doing that. Just talk to members of your own household. It's not great. Can I ask a question about your F1 love?
Since
we're talking about that?
Please.
Your son's name is Noah, and that is not the name of a famous F1 driver. Why isn't it Miko? Or why isn't it Lewis? Why isn't it Schumacher? Ayrton? Ayrton Ferguson. There you go.
You laugh. I proposed Ayrton as a name because I thought, I did. And Marlene was like, shut up. We're never doing that.
For you.
The one that I actually thought made a lot of sense, because let's be real, I'm of Scottish descent and I've got connections to UK stuff and Irish stuff. And it's all the aisles through there. I'm an extremely white person who burns, even though I'm wearing SPF 90. So I knew based on my kind of bloodlines from my grandpa to my dad to me, I'm like, our kid's going to be super white and he's going to look a lot like me because I look like my grandpa and my grandpa had a son who my dad looks so much like him. And I mean, when we stand together, it's just a timeline of 30 years, 30 years, 30 years separating all of the same looking people just at different stages in their life. It's kind of creepy. And so I actually proposed as well when Ayrton got shut down. I'm like, all right, that one was a bit extreme. That wouldn't have made a lot of sense. I was like, what about Jensen? Though, because Jensen Button, it's a running joke with my fiance and I that he is a great analyst. He's now signed on with the Williams racing team to be kind of like a technical analyst for them. So unfortunately, he's not going to be on the Sky Sports F1 broadcast that gets redistributed on TSN throughout the racing season. But he's so good at what he does, and I enjoy his delivery and the accent. I mean, he's got a young little one. And the funny thing was that Marlene loved him because he wore the same gray pants every single time he was at a track that was outside of Europe. She's like, she would just walk downstairs, not know where the race was, She'd go, oh, they're not in Europe this week, are they? I'm like, no, Bahrain. She'd be like, I can tell Jensen's wearing his gray pants again. I'm like, yeah, he only has one pair of road pants. And it was very obvious to anybody who's a diehard who watches all the coverage. But no, I proposed Jensen. That got shut down. We mentioned Noah very quickly off the top when she got pregnant. And then, it just ended up sticking. It was the right call. It's the right call.
Lance Stroll, Ferguson, come on,
no.
Canadians.
I'm not a big Stroll guy. Not gonna lie. I wish that I wish Latifi could get a nice little ride in the Williams there. He's a good driver, but he just needs some love. Anyways, the
Niki Lauda Ferguson. That's the one you missed on. Niki Lauda Ferguson.
Rush is such a good movie, man. Ron Howard.
Ron
Howard did an incredible job being able to put that together. But we digress. The TSN Racing Podcast. Go listen to it because Tim Rainey is a good dude and it deserves all of the love that you can possibly give it. This, of course, is the breakdown, talking all things Canadian football. We were joking before we came on. We like to do our headline segment for you here. And we were saying, there's not a lot going on. And DT and I felt a little dirty about that. We're like, feel kind of guilty. We're like, I feel bad. Like, we don't have a lot to. And then I just said to you, Derek, I'm like, man, it's the dead of winter. Like, we don't have a combine. We're after free agency. I'm like, this is the quietest time of the year. Which for me, I kind of enjoy because, yes, it's quiet and it's a chance to have that lull usually before we ramp up coming up in a month or two. Again, fingers crossed all that gets to happen. But the idea of being able to dive into some film and watch some guys that are going into the CFL draft, get excited about what combine performances look like, that's usually what March is for me. And this year is so different. It's a virtual combine. I don't know what the testing metrics are going to look like. I don't know how much to trust those testing metrics because as much as football ops can try and standardize what's going to be happening with the testing of the CFL Combine, people are going to find their way around it. And that's not at the shot or the disparagement of CFL football ops. They're doing their job. But it's kind of like when you talk about, I remember I watched, I think it was a show called The Mafia or something like that on Netflix about New York City in the 1980s and the 5 major crime families. And at one point, someone's talking about the FBI trying to track down all the mob bosses. And if they end up getting arrested and going to jail, the mob families would basically say, listen, your job is to try and catch us fair and square with evidence that you can prosecute us with in court. Our job is to try and get away with it. Like, we're both doing our job here. And I think that's the relationship we're going to have at the CFL Combine virtually is I don't know at what point somebody would have to be so blatant with coming a couple inches short on a shuttle test or, because there are things that you can see in person where you can flag them immediately and it changes the testing process. Not hitting your chest or coming all the way down on the bench press or 40-yard dash, when you wiggle, do you actually have your arm up and still, or do you jut out of it? I mean, there's all these little dumb things that go into testing that in person, it's standardized. It's the same person. You can see it. But if I just send you a video of me running a 40-yard dash and I say, hey, I ran a 4.24, I mean, how do you validate it? I think that's a challenge moving forward as well. And again, all this testing stuff, it's stupid. It's just to be able to set a baseline for your athleticism. The film is what matters. The interviews are what really matter. But it's so different this year. I had a lot of fun talking about with you on the Sports Cage today because there's so many different tentacles of doing a virtual combine that I've never even had to think about before because we've never been forced to do this.
Yeah, I'm thinking of great ways to cheat. And I'm thinking you carve like 15 pounds out of a 45-pound plate. And then all of a sudden 225 is really like 185 and guys are just cranking it out. Oh, 48 reps, man, they're strong at Guelph. Or, with the 40, right? The classic stories of the 40-yard dash. A guy would send a tape to an NFL team of him running like a 4.19 40. And it turns out he was running a 4.19, like 34-yard. Yeah. Oh, look where I put the tires, just fooling with that. Just squeezing out some inches here, and all of a sudden everybody has the radar graph like Anthony Parker, for crying out loud. It is going to be weird, right? And it's going to be based on teams are going to have to rely on schools and that their relationship to the school is enough to keep everybody on the level. But I thought you made a good point when we talked earlier. There's a certain amount of incentive for schools to have their athletes look great to the Canadian Football League because that reflects well on them. And you just hope everybody can keep it on the up and up and there's not that one bad apple.
If I am Marshall Ferguson and I am a strength and conditioning coordinator from Western, and I have dreams of being a professional football team strength and conditioning coordinator, then there's a lot of incentive for me to have guys coming out that are freaks that I've specifically trained for football. I was really lucky at McMaster. We had Steve Lidstone, who did a lot of work with the women's national hockey program. And, you know, they would have their summer camps at McMaster and come and work out and do the off-ice training and stuff at McMaster where we were. He was exceptional. He worked extremely close with us, and I trusted him a great amount. But he didn't have any dreams of doing something else. Like, he wanted to work at the university level because he had 2 or 3 young children. He lived in Niagara. He loved being able to make the easy commute back and forth from down near St. Catharines towards Hamilton. And he worked with the women's national hockey program, and he made enough money. He's like, I don't need anything else. So I knew everything I was getting from him was pure and honest. But again, if I'm somebody who's working at, somebody University of Calgary, just to throw a school out there off the top of mine, because I was looking at a lot of Calgary guys today in the draft. I mean, if you want to work for the Calgary Stampeders, then you want to get your guys noticed. Again, you run into a spot where I hope that's not what it's going to become. I think everybody's best interest is in just putting out the numbers and living with the numbers and then moving forward as a people. But I do wonder, I really hope when we get the results, I'm not looking at the results and I'm raising an eyebrow because I don't know what to believe, which is a common theme of the last little while here surrounding the CFL. I texted a friend today and I said, I feel like such a dumbass putting together this mock draft because I don't have any answers. Some of these guys I don't have film for a couple of years. And he said, buddy, all we have right now in the CFL is wild speculation. You'll be right at home writing a mock draft that is wildly speculative. I'm like, you know what? Actually, that's kind of true at this point. But all of this is a long-winded way for me to say 2 things. One, please don't read my mock draft because I'm not kidding. I spent, I want to say 3 hours. And I've already watched film on these guys and checked them out YouTube and beyond in their actual game film for the ones that are, accessible. And it was painstaking, man, because there's so many combinations, there's so many needs and positional groups and whatnot. And I put all this together and I changed the slots 500 times. And I think of different reasonings for why it might make sense. And then you change everything all over again. And then you realize, like I did today, that, I've got 6 defensive backs going in the top 18 picks. I'm like, well, it's a good defensive back draft. Is it that good? And I start going through the offensive linemen. And for me, as I'm going through them and I'm looking at the grades I kind of have on them, I'm like, a lot of them feel like in other years, they'd be 3rd and 4th round picks, but I'm only mock drafting the top 2 rounds in this first mock draft that we're doing on CFL.ca. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, but I can't have a mock draft where I don't have offensive linemen up inside the top 10. And then to add another layer to this, DT, is that there are so many guys that are futures. And what that means is you draft them now, you might not see them for a year, 2 years, 3 years. You might see them down the road. Usually that is NFL prospect guys where you say, I'll draft you now, like Devon Smith, where he went and hung out with the Colts for a while and he came back to Edmonton. And you're like, you know what? I'm okay with that. I'll draft you now. I see the talent. It's worth the investment. And that's why you always see the top guys in the CFL Central Scouting Bureau. They don't go first overall like they should because they're the top rated player. They get dropped because it's always the risk reward of when am I going to see this guy, if I'm ever going to see this guy come and be a part of my franchise. And so many players that are from the NCAA, which have an innate advantage because they have game film most recently from 2020. Some, like Deshaun Stevens, a linebacker from Maine that I really like, as recent as, this past week, because they're playing a spring season because they didn't play in the fall. Yeah, they have this advantage where they have film, but also some of them are futures, like a big chunk of them are futures. So it becomes a question of, do CFL teams want to draft guys that they have more film on that they might have to wait on? Or do they want to have to draft a player from U Sports they haven't seen since 2019 that might have changed, that's aged, that's whatever, hasn't been getting legit football reps, and they're going to get them right away. But, by the way, if you get them right away, you're going into a double cohort where there's a double rookie class coming in. So what's the value of drafting somebody for right now? Maybe it's smarter to draft a future. And the whole thing is so confusing. So the first thing I said was, don't read my mock draft. The second thing I'll say is, if you're going to read the mock draft, just do it with the realization that we're all guessing. I mean, I have no idea what a lot of the people in and around the CFL think about how to handle this draft because they've never seen anything like this before. And neither have I. I've been doing this for 5 years, and every year it's been the exact same. And this year it's like, I'm going to throw 7 curveballs to you, and I'm just going, here's my list of players I love that might fit in this spot. And I just put them there, and I hope that you guys enjoy it.
Yeah. So you're saying I shouldn't use your mock draft when it comes to gambling time on the draft, because I almost, I think, broke even last year, but I missed, like, who would Calgary take at 3? I thought Mason Bennett. I nailed, will someone take this dude? And who was it? Dallas Cowboys. The Riders took him in the 8th round. Oh, God, I can't believe I'm blank on this name early. Neville Gallimore. Will he go at the 19th pick? Was a prop bet. And you're like, no, he absolutely won't go at the 19th pick, even though that's the territorial pick Toronto gets. No, it's not happening. So there's money to be made on the draft, but apparently not by reading Marshall Ferguson's one this week. Down the road, you'll be better, right? You're promising better down the road.
The funny thing is, like, and again, I love everybody at CFL.ca, and I love that they have me come on and do this. I don't want to sound like sour grapes, and I do enjoy doing it, but I enjoy doing a lot more, in all honesty, in a normal year where I actually have like recent film and I get to talk to people and go to combine. So it's a real struggle this year. It really is. And and yeah, the CFL.ca, my second mock draft is due in a week. I'm like, I don't know what's gonna change. Like how much is gonna change in the next week going into the pros? Because usually it's before the combine, and then we do one immediately after the combine because people kind of shoot up and down depending on their stock, and then we do one right before the draft itself. When the virtual combine information comes in, again, we've already talked about how much do you trust it and how much does it raise or lower people's draft stock. So it's a unique time for sure surrounding the CFL Combine and the CFL draft, but it's part of the off-season fun for sure. It's something that I like covering, and I think that people, even if you don't really have a love for U Sports football the way I do, it gives you a little bit of a sense of what your organization, what your team truly cares about and where they are investing, because we say it all the time, free agency is for need, draft is for value. And yeah, you can draft somebody and plug them in and go to work, but a lot of the time it's getting somebody. Now, for example, I have Toronto going with a futures offensive lineman in the first round. Why? Because Nick Arbuckle is the plan moving forward. There's a reason that they got him, and they got Ryan Denton. This is not a 2-year thing, fingers crossed for Argos fans, of getting that group together. So you have to start planning now for down the road, while also thinking of what you have in front of you as it stands. And I did not go receiver, by the way, for the Argos, because I'm like, I think they're tapped out as of right now. I think that's pretty good as it stands right now.
Apologies to all Josh Palmer fans, I guess, for that one. I won't be going to that. I'm just going to make a wild prediction. You're going to fall in love with Logan Bandy's broad jump, and then that's going to be the big difference. He's going to be the big mover between Marshall Mach 1 and Marshall Mach 2.
No, it is amazing. I'll just say this as a kind of passing note here as we move on with the show, that the University of Calgary, the bodies that they get, man, like I'm going through heights, weights, and watching film, and it is unbelievable the size of human beings that they are able to get on the offensive line at the University of Calgary. It's like you're looking at 6'5". The number jumped out to me. They have an offensive guard whose name escapes me right now, but it was like 6'5", 365. And then you're watching him on film, and he's not moving great. How could you expect him to at 365? But I'm looking at him, I'm going, man, you know how much better you would feel if you just dropped like 40 pounds? Like Alaric Jackson, who is coming out of Iowa, who's top rated on the Central Scouting Bureau, perfect body type to me. He's like 6'4", 6'5", 318, and he can move. Like that right there, that's the body type that you want at the top. Get into the 340s, 350, 365s. There's other guys on that O-line, and even Logan Bandy that you mentioned. I'm like, that's a monster of a dude. And they're just on film, they're pinballing people. Like if you're looping blitzers inside, like Nelson Lacombo's like, hey, I'm going to blitz inside here. And then the guard just turns and like catches him with one arm and bang, and he just flies against the wall and he's gone 15 feet the other direction. So they get some crazy body types over there, but it's nice to watch some U Sports film, even if it is older stuff. Let's get into our main topic for you today, which we've kind of been saving this one for a little while. I thought it would be a lot easier. It is the best positional groups around the Canadian Football League. And the reason that I liked this idea is that we did so much talking about free agency and what people have been able to add and where teams have gotten better or worse, but really what is their strength? What is the thing they hang their hat on? And for me, positional groups really defines all of that, because if you got great receivers and quarterbacks, obviously it's a passing game. If you've got a great varied running back room, then as much as DT slanders running backs all the time, because their value is just not there in the Canadian game, the concept of having a well-rounded running back room, there's an argument to be made that that is something that can help you down the stretch. In terms of defensive line, I mean, having a deep group that can get after the quarterback, who has the best D line in the CFL. So we thought we would bounce our way through some positional groups here. What did you think when I tossed this at you before we get into the first group being defensive backs in the secondary, DT?
I was trying to figure out, okay, how many are Hamilton going to win in my books? I love the thought of this. And I was curious to look at them and say, okay, well, did anybody surprise me by picking it up in the offseason? Or is this kind of, am I going to be caught with the same thoughts I had in 2020? Yeah. Because there were teams that made defined moves in 2020, right? Both on the coaching front and the personnel front. You went, oh boy, that team, oh, they're going to be good in 2020. We didn't have a 2020. So I was curious to kind of dive into it and go, oh, I think the same strengths are there, because some guys who moved to one team in 20 went to a different team in 21, or I left my team and nope, now I'm coming back just because I thought I was going to Hamilton, but I'm going back to Montreal. I'm going to be the Sam linebacker there. I was curious to see how it played out. And then a little bit of at what positions will I value depth, and at what positions am I caring mostly about the elite player at that level. So there's a few ways we're going to have some disagreements on this. And I think we're probably going to have different approaches in certain spots as well, which will be neat.
Yeah, the depth versus the elite top end talent one. The first one that jumped out to me was Winnipeg running back room, because I'm like, what he does by himself, that dude in 33, like you could make the argument that's the best room with him in any room. It doesn't matter. And that's because he impacted the game in so many ways with Paul LaPolice in that offense. But we'll get to the running backs coming up for you here. Let's begin on the back end of the defense with the defensive backs. I struggled with a couple of these defensive ones, so I'm wondering what you have for DBs to kick us off.
I started out with 4 teams because I really liked what BC did in free agency, but then they had to let Aaron Grimes go. So while they look nice and they got Marcus Sales, they didn't quite make it. I really like Edmonton. They got street free agents for both corners. That was nice. I ultimately got down to Hamilton and Saskatchewan. And Saskatchewan returns all of their 5 defensive backs, but needs a replacement for Derek Moncrief at Sam linebacker, while Hamilton, all 6 of those guys were on the roster last year. They didn't play Sam linebacker. That was a different deal. But so I ended up going with Hamilton, just as I have them across the back. Delvin Breaux, Cariel Brooks, Adeleke at safety, and they're deep at safety with Canadian guys that can play. Ciante Evans, Frankie Williams, and Jamal Roll. Adding Ciante Evans to that crew that's crazy to me. And it makes up for the loss of Richard Leonard to Calgary before the 20 season. I love their depth Canadian-wise. I love their Americans. Roll, I don't know. You would know better if Roll's played some time at Sam, but someone's going to come down into that spot, and that'll be a guy with good CFL experience so far. So as far as defensive backs go, I mean, it's Hamilton by this much over the Riders. That one was probably the toughest. That was the second toughest positional argument I had with myself.
Yeah, when I went back through and looked at the positional additions and the keeping of guys that were really important for me, Saskatchewan was an important one, because obviously being able to bring back Ed Gainey is like that's the home run in 2021. If you don't do that, we're really not having this conversation. Nick Marshall, I feel like he is underrated. I think a lot of people think of him as a toy, but Nick Marshall does a really good job out there on the edge for me. And then I looked at Hamilton, and again, it's the value of the elite versus the depth. And Delvin Breaux, to me, by himself is just so special. And it took me a while to understand the impact of Cariel Brooks on the Ticats defense, because you have to have the right Robin to pair with Batman in Delvin Breaux. And I think the Ticats have that in Cariel Brooks. And again, it was one of those under the radar signings, if you want to call it that, where the Ticats are announcing a new signing, every day at 11 a.m. for 2 weeks straight. And one of them is Cariel Brooks. And the thought struck me how important that was when they did it, because Delvin is going to jam guys, run with them, be physical. not going to get a lot of targets on the outside there. Well, where are the targets going to be funneled then? Because the team's not going to give up on an entire side of the field. They're going to try to play off Simone, yes, but anytime they can get Cariel Brooks, who is a downhill hard hitter in man coverage, they're going to go after him. But he held his own. Like he's played at a high level alongside Delvin Rowe. If he's a terrible man coverage guy and the Ticats decide to go man because Delvin Rowe's just so special that you just shut down to Shaq Evans or shut down to Darrell Walker, whatever, then they're in a bad spot, because Cariel Brooks, if that was a weakness of his that showed throughout the year, they would have been in a really rough spot, I think. But he hasn't shown that to be a weakness. So I ended up going with Hamilton as well on this. And again, I'm as the guy who's called games to the Ticats on radio, this is going to sound repetitive because I do like a lot of their groups, but I looked at it as Tunde Adeleke was better than I thought he would be when he came into Hamilton in 19. He gave them more flexibility creatively with Mark Washington coming down into the box, roaming around, certain packages playing kind of like a Sam free safety hybrid position, a little bit of a robber as well. They could bring in Mike Daly when they need to, depending on sub packages, and almost play like a cover 2 type look once in a while as well. So the idea of doing that, and then Jamal Roll that you mentioned, he hasn't really played Sam. The loss of Rico Murray, I think, really does hurt, and they're going to have some difficulty being able to fill that. But Jamal Roll, when he was playing over at boundary corner when Delvin Breaux was out, he was spectacular. I mean, he gave up a couple of deep shots, but he was really, really solid. So for him to be playing the field backed up by, let's say, Courtney Steven, if there's not room at free safety, that's a win for them to be able to have that kind of depth out there with a veteran Canadian to give more flexibility. And then the one that I think is really important here is that Frankie Williams there was a game actually in Saskatchewan, I think it was, where Frankie Williams had a ton of tackles, and most of them were on running plays, but he was so involved in the game plan that he started to make his way from field corner into field half for the Ticats throughout the year. And I remember asking Orlando Steinauer, what's the thought process behind that? And he said, he makes too many damn plays for us to just leave him standing out there on an island. Like, if he's going to make that plays from field corner, imagine what he can do at field half. And like you say, when you ended up losing Richard Leonard going into 2020 to Calgary, I think a lot of people in Hamilton kind of shrugged, because Richard Leonard was sensational at the start, had all those picks, and then kind of faded and his productivity went away a little bit. Well, Frankie Williams, when he bumped in, it created room for somebody who had earned reps in Jamal Roll when he played boundary corner to go to field corner. And that unit as a whole, again, I'm not saying, hey, they're the best, they're never going to give up more than 100 yards passing or something crazy. What I am saying is they've got Canadian depth, they've got flexibility, they've got top-end talent, they've got youthful guys, and they've got veterans. And I really don't know what more you could ask for in a secondary group.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Just looking at it, Jamal Roll and Frankie Williams were, by our numbers, 2 of the top 4 in yards per target allowed in the 2019 season. That's really good. And I'd be remiss if we go this whole conversation without mentioning how absolutely special I think Luchez Purifoy is at that field side halfback for the Riders. The more I watched him, and I come with a certain level of CFL knowledge, but so it's less than these guys. But as I watch him, I go, God, that guy is so smart. And then, oh, by the way, he's also an incredible athlete too. That he wasn't a divisional all-star or a CFL all-star at that halfback spot in 2019 it was a declaration of malarkey on my show. I couldn't believe it based on how good that guy is. So we can't get away without me mentioning that I think Luchez Purifoy is just awesome. And if you took all those defensive backs and you put them in the mix, I'd pick probably Delvin Breaux out number 1, but Purifoy would be by far the number 2 guy I would pick out of those 12 players.
I wanted to mention here, because I wanted your thoughts on Calgary's secondary, because I know that you had mentioned BC and Edmonton and what they had done, but what do you have right now on depths for Calgary? Because I was really interested in them. They were up amongst the top, if not the top, in interceptions created in 2019. And I wasn't just going off picks, because that's the easy thing to do, is to Google CFL interceptions and pick the group that has the most and go, they're the greatest. But these things change and they move around a lot, especially over the year where we didn't have games. So what do you think of Calgary's secondary? Because I'm kind of intrigued by what they have set up there.
I don't know what they're going to do at field corner, but I have Raheem Wilson, Deshaun Amos, Royce Mechie, and Richard Leonard from boundary to half. Jamar Wallet, Sam, I'm a big fan of till he decides he's not playing. Losing Trey Roberson, you lost maybe the best starting boundary corner in the league in 2019. There, you could say Winston Rose, you could say a healthy Delvin Breaux, but you have an elite CFL boundary corner that you lose and you have to replace with a guy who doesn't have a ton of experience. I love that you add Richard Leonard in there, but who are they losing? Gosh, the veteran that they're losing, I can't believe I lost his name because it's been forever and we're in a pandemic.
There's a lot of names like that for me.
Long-time Calgary Stampeder defensive back.
Veteran, Smitty.
Thank you, Brandon Smith. Thank you. Yeah, that's. Go ahead. So I have some questions about what Calgary's going to be able to put up in its back six.
You know what's funny about Brandon Smith? When I was in training camp with the Stampeders in 2013, he was already respected as the old man. That was 2013, and like he just went out on the other side. So let's get into the linebackers here. I'll be honest about this one. If Larry Dean had stayed in Hamilton, this was a write-off for me. This was just a runaway. Like it was Dean and it was Simone Lawrence, just for the number of tackles, the way they worked together, all the rest. I actually decided to go Winnipeg here. And the reason that I went Winnipeg is I feel like the influence of Adam Bighill is enough for me that regardless of what's happened at Will, and again, this is big picture stuff. We're separating it into positional groups, but if you're looking at it in the big picture, what they do up front with the front four in Winnipeg, that's what creates the opportunities a lot of the time for Bighill. But the fact is, Bighill doesn't miss. Like Bighill makes so many plays, and I've seen a lot of coaches that are peeling through CFL film online that have Twitter accounts that are analyzing different kind of approaches to linebacker play, and every time they post a coaching clip of keeping your hips square or chasing somebody down or different approaches of the line of scrimmage or filling a gap, or it's almost always Adam Bighill. He's so sound and he's so smart in the way that he approaches things. Calgary, I think, is right there in the conversation if they were to have Hawley back, but I don't think that's happening anytime soon either. So this for me is more about the empty slots of what could have been in 2020, more so than it is the greatness of 2021.
I am in hell because I'm trying to sort by missed tackle percentage, and it's just my computer screwed me, Marshall. You know
that's
what this
okay.
is? This is exactly like because I was asked by a reporter in Winnipeg, hey, what's Adam Bighill's missed tackle rate? And continue to play with me, stupid Microsoft Excel, and I had to go back and look because it seemed like it was really up in 2019.
So I'll cover for you here while you're dealing with the computer stuff, because when I see him play, like when I say he doesn't miss, what I don't mean is that he never misses a tackle. What I mean is that he always seems to make the right judgment. Like his reads and his ability to react so quickly. Very rarely do you see, let's say, the Tiger Cats with Dane Evans in the backfield, and it's Brandon Banks running a jet motion across his face, and they fake the jet and hand it off inside to Tyrell Sutton. Very rarely do you see Adam Bighill take off with the jet. Like, you can't trick that guy. His eyes are so disciplined when you're watching him play the game. He doesn't get distracted by the candy and the motion and the fireworks. He just stands there, waits for you to do whatever the hell you want to do in the backfield, and then makes the play that is needed by that Winnipeg defense. And again, I give great credit to Willie Jefferson, Jackson Jeffcoat, Drake Nevis in 2019 up front alongside Steven Richardson, alongside Jake Thomas. Like, there was a lot of reasons why they did that. But I also look at the ways in which he's able to just stay disciplined and create plays that he's being asked to. And for me, that's why I put Winnipeg up there, because there are a lot of really good linebackers in the Canadian Football League. But the way that guy very rarely, if ever, gets fooled, that's special to me.
Yeah, I was able to put this all together. I just have him 24% missed tackle rate, which is really quite high for a linebacker, and it's not out of character for him. It's a little higher than it has been in past years. And for whatever reason, I have a fetish for tackles that were missed, where you're getting there and the guy runs through you, or the arm, or whatever it is. There's no question that Bighill is an elite backer. I can less describe what Kyrie Wilson does at that will linebacker spot. I just know that I like everything that they have going in Winnipeg. I've thought about Winnipeg for this one. I ended up back at Hamilton though. Simone Lawrence is Simone Lawrence, and I'm a big Javon Santos Knox fan. I really think he can do some. If it's Lawrence at the will and Santos Knox at the Mac. If Santos Knox is healthy, I thought it was a huge signing for Edmonton in 2019, and I think it's a big one. They have the American depth to back that up as well. And I mean, it's interesting that we both pick linebacking cores that play behind super elite defensive lines.
Yeah.
I think that's going to pay off. But BC might go 2 Canadians. Toronto will go Mwamba Judge, which is fine, but I think has limitations in spots where you normally play Americans. Edmonton, I don't know who's going to play there. I have a lot of question marks about a lot of linebacking cores, but I have very few question marks when it comes to Winnipeg, which would have been my 2, and Hamilton, which is my number 1.
Yeah, it makes it a lot easier to play linebacker in the Canadian Football League when offensive linemen are not doubling a nose tackle, getting off that double and getting to the second level, and then riding you into wherever the play is going. So it makes sense that we have those where the D-lines are great. The Toronto one I did find to be interesting because, as you say, limitations in spots where you typically play Americans. But if you were to build an all-Canadian roster, you'd probably be going outside of Corey Greenwood. You'd be going Enoch Mwamba, and at the will, you'd be going with Cam Judge in that spot. So I think this is going to be a theme throughout with the positional groups because there's been so much turnover with Toronto, and they've done so many interesting things with their roster construction this offseason that they have the talent on paper, and we're judging it on paper. But we're also trying to figure out what the combinations of these human beings in positional groups alongside each other is going to result in once we actually hit the field. And Toronto, they earn the respect, I think, by week 3, 4, 5, where you realize, wow, that's a pretty good group up front and their D-line's getting after it. But as we sit here taping on March 23rd, it's tough for me to say Mwamba and Judge is better than Simone and anybody or Big Hill and anybody.
Yeah, because Simone's such a stud. I think you just stumbled upon our next topic, which is build a 24 entirely out of Canadians. Where do I put Lacombo? Is he going to be safety? Could he be the will? But then I can't have Judge. Okay, so he'll be the. And, oh yeah, we're gonna have a good time with that one.
That'll be good.
I like that.
Looking forward to that. All right, so that is the linebacker group for you. Let's go D-line here. We've already mentioned.
Let's do this way, Marshall. Let's say on the count of 3 who we chose. Ready?
Okay. Yeah.
1,
2, 3. Winnipeg. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I knew that was coming. Why Winnipeg for you? Because Hamilton is really good here too. Ooh.
Yeah. So again, this is part of the reason that I love this thought process is I grew up playing NBA Jam, NBA Hang Time, the old 2-on-2 basketball where you're looking Dennis Rodman and Michael Jordan going up against Sean Kemp and Gary Payton, and you're deciding, okay, what are the strengths and weaknesses of this guy versus that guy, and how do we? And for me, if you're going Jagger Davis against Willie Jefferson, like you can easily say, well, that's a stalemate. But for me, I go by a quarter of an inch Willie Jefferson because I saw what he did when highly motivated and like that dude. And I hate to say it as if he's not always highly motivated because I don't think Willie's one of those guys that turns it on and turns it off. But when he turns it really on, oh my God. Like I watched back the 2019 Grey Cup a couple of different times and it's like Chris Van Zyl and Riker Matthews are really, really good offensive tackles. And you watch back that game and it's like he's using his length and he's just basically driving Van Zyl backwards into the pocket. And then he's giving Riker Matthews like an outside-inside move and just swimming past him in a way that Monstars are not supposed to be able to move to get to the quarterback. And so I love the way that Willie Jefferson owns that. I've also recently seen videos of him and Jeffcoat training together down in Texas, and they look scarier than ever. No. And they're training together. They're running hills with their trainer, and they look incredible. Like they look like they're in the best shape. So I'm looking at this as I don't want to get to the start of the season with 2 motivated dudes who are exceptional at their skill sets and just write them off and then have to bite my tongue halfway through the year when I go, yeah, Willie Jefferson's already on pace for the sack record or something crazy like that. So that's the ends. That's really important, obviously. And in Hamilton, if you're comparing those straight up, it's Jagger Davis versus Julian Hauser or Mason Bennett deciding if they decide to go with a bit more of a Canadian kind of feel at that other DN spot. At the defensive tackles, Ted Laurent and Dylan Wynn on the inside, I think you can make the argument as if we were chopping this into even smaller positional groups, that might be second to none in the entire league in their ability to influence the game. But when you factor in how underrated I believe the interior of that defensive line for Winnipeg is, because Ted and Dylan, they get a lot of love in Hamilton, and I think across the CFL, and it's well earned. I think the guys in Winnipeg do a lot of similar things and don't get the love. And I understand Drake Nevis is gone. He's off to Toronto. but I say it every week on the show. Steven Richardson is one of the most underrated players. He's a fire hydrant. He's got short arms. He's the exact opposite body type of Willie Jefferson, but he can anchor and he can own two people. And that's his job in that defense is I've got Big Hill behind me and I got Willie Jefferson beside me and I got Jeffcoat on the other side of me. My job is to be here and to anchor, but he's not like a nose tackle. He's not a Vince Wilfork. He's actually pushing the pocket while getting anchored and also just trying to basically hold two people up so others can make plays around him. So that's why I believe that Richardson is the special sauce in this. Whatever they decide to do with that other defensive tackle spot in Winnipeg, as long as it's above average, I think that's the best defensive line in the CFL.
Yeah, I'm with you. Just a couple of notes I have. Jackson Jeffcoat. I don't know if a lot of people understand just how good he is. 6-game injured list last year. So he played 15 games, including the playoffs. 48 quarterback pressures, was third most in the league. And he did a full term on the 6-game injured list.
That's crazy.
That's kooky time. And, I just wanted to make a point about Ja'Gared Davis because you compare ones and Willie Jefferson comes out on top. I have been on team Ja'Gared Davis for quite some time because he was always a guy, and he's another one of the guys who I'm glad I started tracking every play in the CFL because he would never get double-digit sacks, the number we use to measure dudes. He'd have 7. And you go, well, he's fine. That guy has always generated pressure from the edge. Quick pressure. He had always done it. He just didn't get home. And to me, quarterback pressures are more valuable to me than quarterback sacks. And they're certainly, in my mind, a better predictor of what's to come in the future. I'd said to people before 19, he's going to have double-digit sacks this year. And I didn't know that for sure, but it was a pretty good bet because if you're getting to the quarterback 50 times a season, a few times you're going to get him. You're not always going to be stuff like that. So I think even now, and maybe it's because Ja'Gared's pretty quiet. He's not flamboyant and he's not, like a superhero, stature like Willie Jefferson. Ja'Gared Davis, is he in the running to, I don't know if I put him in the Charleston Willie category, but to me, he's the top of the next category. He is that good in my books.
Yeah, I do put him in that top group, honestly, because he is the one fair. ABC of that group. And the thing that I always love about him watching games live is that Ja'Gared Davis has some really incredible moves, but kind of similar to his personality, they're quiet. Like his body, because sometimes Willie Jefferson looks like he's playing basketball when he's trying to get to the quarterback, right? Like he'll pop off the ball, give you a big head fake, throw his arms twice, and then he's like ripping and swimming and fighting. And Ja'Gared doesn't look like he ever makes a move. And he just like slides around the O-tackle and all of a sudden he's in the backfield. And I'm always amazed watching back games. And again, because you focus on these guys individually more than I do in your tracking DT, you must watch him and be amazed at the idea that it's not like he's throwing these wild hands and smashing offensive linemen and ripping and swimming. He just kind of like gets them and kind of gives this like slow head fake and he changes his pace but his burst for a guy that has that thick and powerful of a lower body to be able to go from not 0 to 100, but to go from 10 to 90 as quickly as he does. Because he'll go from 0 to 10 and then he'll drop back to 0, back to 25 to 100. And it's his pacing as a pass rusher that I've always been enamored by. I think I asked him about it one time off microphone in Hamilton. And I said, hey, I saw you hit this move twice and you saved it for the final drive in the fourth quarter. And he's like, yeah, don't tell anybody. That's my thing. Like my pacing, my switching it up. And he's like, I don't want people to realize that on film studies. So just let's keep that between you and I. But he's really, really, really special.
All right. Trivia before we move on from defensive line. Name the top 4 players in quarterback pressures in 2019. Go.
Willie.
Yep.
Ja'Gared.
Yep.
Part of me wants to say Micah Johnson, but I know that's wrong.
No.
Just because BC didn't really do much.
What teams were we talking about?
And then I'll go with Jeffcoat.
Yeah, and then Hamilton.
I'm just trying. I would win.
Julian Hauser.
Oh, okay. How's really? So the top 4 of them. Yeah. Okay.
The defensive ends for those 2 teams led the league in quarterback pressures. Top 4.
Crazy, man. That's Hauser doesn't get enough love because Hauser's viewed as kind of like the I don't want to say the ugly puppy, but he's the one, I think, in the group. If you're looking around, if you're looking around at the SPCA and you're trying to find which one you love the most, it's like, oh my God, Ted Laurent's incredible at what he does. I don't want to assign breeds to all of these different dogs, but let's be real. I mean, Teddy would be a big, thick dog. And then you're looking over and you're like, Jacared, wow, he does everything. Dylan Wynn, he's a bulldog. And you're like, it's kind of a golden retriever in Julian Hauser. He's just like, nice guy, does his job, never says anything. Nobody really knows who he is. So that's surprising to me that he was able to surpass the likes of Charleston Hughes, et cetera. But again, when you're getting that many single matchups because the entirety of your D-line is that talented, that makes sense.
Yeah, 48 for Hauser, 47 for Charleston. Charleston would have missed it. I don't know, forget how many games Hauser played, but Hauser had the Grey Cup as well, and Hughes missed a game with that broken elbow. So yeah, but got him by one. It's those four defensive ends are they're pretty good.
Yes, no doubt. Let's go to the other side of the ball here. We're going to carry on through the offensive line. What do you got here, DT?
This one was hard because last year, the year before, and maybe the year before that, I'd just been like Winnipeg and
right.
Next question. There were some. I wondered though because Riker Matthews goes to BC, and I think that helps them cure some of their problems if they get healthy. Edmonton has all the tackles you need. Dennis and Rogers and Randy Richards, and what are they going to do with that? Actually, in truth, I ended up back at Winnipeg. I just think Stanley Bryant is the best offensive lineman in the league. He's been the best offensive lineman in the league for, I don't know, 6 years. Like, that guy is phenomenal. Jamarcus Hardrick, I've heard good and bad about Jamarcus Hardrick, and I don't understand the people who think he's bad. Am I overestimating him because Winnipeg likes to go with that quick strike under Matt Nichols? I have some questions about how they'll do in the middle with what I presume will be Desjardins, Couture. Patty Neufeld is a rock, Saskatchewan proud. To me, it starts with the tackles, and nobody has a tackle duo like Winnipeg. It's just I can't see. I don't even want to think about who's next because maybe it's Edmonton, but Winnipeg to me is just by far, because of those two guys on the end, is just by far the number one.
Yeah, I had a hard time going against Winnipeg here, but just for conversation's sake, I am going to go with Edmonton because when I looked at them, there's a couple of Canadian pieces here that I find interesting. David Beard is one that I think we don't talk about a whole lot, and I'm always interested in my guards and my national guys, but being able to have that. Don't forget Thomas Jack Cardilla, who got drafted out of Buffalo in 2020. I think he's a legit player. I talked off the top of this about body types with offensive linemen. He's listed at 6'4", 300. He totally fits what they want to do. Being able to have, like you say, tackle spots, Colin Kelly, Randy Richards, Sir Vincent Rogers, that stuff's all good. Jacob Ruby, pretty good player. Kyle Saxelid was a high draft pick as well out of UNLV. So I think Brock Sunderland's done a good job. If I'm remembering correctly, most, if not all of those guys were either acquisitions of his or draft picks of his. And I think they've done a good job of building depth and talent throughout the line, which you're going to find on every roster. Like, there's going to be prioritization of offensive linemen that are nationals, obviously, across the board. But the other one, again, and they keep coming back up, Hamilton, I would have picked Hamilton similar to what I said about I would have picked him at linebacker if Larry Dean was there. I would have picked him if Riker was there and if Filer was guaranteed to be back. But because Filer's up in the air and likely not coming back, and because Riker Matthews is a BC Lion, then it creates these questions on the offensive line. If you've got 2 holes or more in your O-line that you're trying to figure out, and again, I call them holes. They might have solutions in-house they already know about. They might have things that they trust. I was laughing thinking about this the other day because I'm going through the CFL draft process and I'm going, well, Hamilton, like Drew Alamang and Sean Burke, they always like to go offensive line in the first couple of rounds, right? Whether that's building the depth or just being able to get a top end talent like they did early on with Brandon Revenberg a couple years ago. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, man, they have a lot of needs. And I'm like, wait a minute. They have Jesse Gibbon, who's one of the best guys in the draft a couple years ago out of Waterloo, who's a Hamilton native. And then they got Coulter Woodmansey out of Guelph last year. I'm like, they don't have needs. They already have a pipeline. Like, they're already developing everything. So, again, either of those guys might slot in. They might move Rev over into center, although I did ask him about it, and he said he'd prefer to stay at guard. But the idea of saying that there are massive voids on that group, I don't think there are. But until I see it on field, similar to what I said about the defensive backfield earlier, I'm going to trust what I know at this point. The other one that I thought had real potential in this conversation, but it's gone through some tough times. You might be thinking I'm going to mention Calgary. I'm thinking Montreal. Like Montreal, to me,
Oh, really?
they had some
Okay.
real potential for me in this conversation. If I open up my free agency breakdown here, and it's not, just necessarily retirements or guys that decided to move on, but when you look at the offensive line spots that have moved on here, obviously Tyler Johnstone was the one that ended up deciding that he was the one, right, that decided he wanted to retire, move into policing, I believe. But they had, between some of the retirements they've had in recent years and trying to build around Vernon Adams Jr., who's a different type of quarterback to be able to piece together, they did end up on their offensive line bringing back Tony Washington. I've never been a huge Tony Washington guy. Like, I have great respect for what he does. I'm not here to tear him down. I'm just saying, I think that when you look across the board at tackles in the league, he does a good job. Landon Rice does his thing, but in Hamilton, he was June Jones' sixth offensive lineman toy that he would just put out there and be like, we're just going to put you here and have people blitz you all the time. So let's just use you as a placeholder, essentially. Just trust us. You're going to do your job. And then looking down further here for re-signings on the online, Donald Hawkins they brought back, which is not really name brand notoriety for a lot of people. So I think they feel a little bit empty to me in a group that a couple of years ago I thought more highly of them, and I think that they'll probably earn their way back into prominence based on the fact that they have William Stanback back and that he's going to go crazy regardless of who's up front for them. But they did a really good job getting to the second level back, I thought, the start of 2019, and I don't know where they stand right now with that.
Trey Rutherford is the young guy retired at 25 to be a police officer.
I was trying to mix up my supplemental draft picks and my guys who came. I don't know, but they did some creative things to get those two guys in Johnstone and Rutherford for sure.
I have Montreal's offensive line right now as Tony Washington, left to right, David Foucault, Christian Matt, Sean Jameson, and I think Jason Lauzon-Seguin at right tackle. And that scares me. I don't love that. If that's where they're going to go, I don't love that for Montreal.
The Foucault one is what scares me. Like, after we watched BC play, because Foucault got bounced around at a variety of different positions. And again, I understand that offensive line as a unit in BC was just not good and that they were missing most, if not all, links in that chain. But Foucault got beat on a bunch of just simple one-on-ones, regardless of whether he was lined up at guard or tackle. That's scary to me of having him, because Tony Washington, I think, will make up for a lot of those weaknesses that you might have. And it's not like Foucault is some trash player. Like, he was super highly rated, super high prospect, went to the NFL, Carolina Panthers, comes back. BC's super happy to get him, but also look at what BC was super happy to get at the time was not Brent Urban, the other name, Brett Boyko. And he didn't work out in BC either. And then he went on to Saskatchewan now. So the group that they brought in that they thought were going to be home run hitters and protect Mike Riley for the next 3-4 years, it didn't turn out. They've had to rebuild the whole thing, and it's basically dispersed those guys across the CFL. With that being said, Danny Machocha knows David Foucault extremely well, so he's probably going to be able to reach him in a different way and be able to actually paint the picture of what they're doing offensively. That should give him a little bit more of a comfort level, which comfort level, understanding, and reps are, I think, the three most important things in offensive line play.
I've wanted for a couple of years for someone I wanted Ottawa to go American at tackle, because I really thought I watched Jason Lauzon-Seguin would struggle. And I think if Montreal has brought him in to make him their starting tackle, that's going to be, I don't love it. Christian Matt in the middle, bring it on. Christian Matt in the middle. He always does real well by our numbers. I have concerns in a lot of other spots for Montreal. And as much as I think William Stanback is phenomenal, you got to leave him some space to get open, and you got to keep Vernon Adams from getting killed. That's going to be a question I have about Montreal and why I think Montreal falls down in 2021.
Okay, interesting. All right, so that's what we've got there on the O-line. Receivers, this one was straightforward for me. I will allow you to go first. You have the floor.
Straightforward?
Yeah, straightforward.
How is it straightforward for you? This was the one I had the most problem with. Who was straightforward the best receiving core for you?
Brandon Banks, Braylon Addison, Devere Posey. I thought those three together were enough for me. I understand Edmonton, Darrell Walker, Greg Ellingson. You can factor in some of the Nationals, Tavon Smith. Otherwise, Winnipeg, I get it. Darvin Adams alongside. I'm trying to think of
Ryan Mitchell.
Yeah, and BC, obviously, Burnham is going to be a leader in many statistical categories, and he's going to be surrounded by Shaq Johnson and some other guys. But for me, when Speedy and Addison are at their best, again, when I go back to playing that game of NBA Jam, I'm like, maybe it's the fun cartoonish thing about Speedy and Braylon Addison because they're undersized guys and they do play so quick. And maybe I overhype them because I have visions of the 2018 June Jones offense, and nothing against Tommy Condell and what he's done. But when I think of Speedy as a wide receiver, I think of June's offense because it was so predicated around what Brandon Banks was doing. But Braylon Addison is so productive, and I understand he does it in a variety of ways, but he's so productive in Condell's offense. They find ways to get him the ball in creative places. And then all of a sudden, you don't know who's the one and who's the two in that back and forth. And that's why I think it makes them unique. Again, you could go ahead and pick Kyron Moore alongside Shaq Evans, and you wouldn't be wrong. You can pick what I have in Hamilton. You can pick Montreal, the group that they have. I mean, there's so many talented receivers in this conversation. I understand why you would have a hard time with it. I just believe at their best, which is what I'm judging, Brandon Banks is one of the most explosive players in the league, and Braylon Addison is just an incredible number two that feels like a number one on many days.
Yeah. Shout out to Montreal for putting together a real interesting core there. But I got down to two teams, and it was Edmonton and Hamilton.
Yeah.
All the stuff he said, I mean, Brandon Banks was the best receiver in the league. Edmonton, to me, has two of the top 5 receivers in the league between Darrell Walker and Greg Ellingson. Addison, everything you said, weapon, runs out of the backfield more than any back. I then go to the third guys on those depth charts, and you go, would I rather have DeVere Posey or would I rather have Armonte Edwards? And the immediate reactive part of my brain goes, ooh, 100-yard touchdown to the Grey Cup. I'd rather have DeVere Posey. And then I slap myself for going, Armonte Edwards is a real weapon in this game downfield. I really like Armonte Edwards. So as much as I'm initially DeVere Posey, I end up transitioning back and go, ooh, at 3, it's pretty close. At Canadian, I don't think it's particularly close between the two. I would take Tavon Smith over any Canadian that I think Hamilton could put out there. Who's going to be the 5th? I don't know who's going to be the boundary slot in Edmonton. I don't know who's going to be the number 3, the Luke Tasker role in Hamilton. So honestly, just because you said Hamilton, I almost wanted to say Hamilton. I'm going to go with Edmonton because I just think, man, between Darrell and Ellingson and Armonte, and then I'm giving love to Canadians. Tavon Smith is the deal breaker for me. Nice. Edmonton is the best receiving core in the CFL.
Boom.
You're welcome, Trevor Harris. You're going to have a great time with those guys. My goodness.
And Elizondo calling it up, right? I'm just looking at the 2019 kind of receiving efficiency numbers that I have, production grade versus targeted touch percentage. So basically, how much am I throwing to you? And how productive are you when I throw the ball to you? And it is a fun conversation because Banks had the 2nd highest targeted touch percentage behind only Burnham. But when you look at the number 2 in BC in 2019, and again, tough year for the Lions, it was Lamar Durant, and he was behind at least 10 other receivers when it came to targeted touch percentage. In Montreal, their number 1 obviously was Geno Lewis. Their number 2 was Quan Bray, who's back in the fold now, followed very closely by DeVere Posey. So you can make the argument that Montreal in that 2019 group with Posey in, he was an excellent number 3 because him as a number 3 was higher than most other teams' number 3, which is what put it over the top for me on Hamilton. If he's going to play that role, he actually played that role in 2019 for Montreal. If he can do it to that level or better, alongside what Addison and Banks brought to the table, then you've got something special going. And the other one that I would mention here is when you're looking at the strength of the number 2, Ellingson alongside Darrell Walker. Ellingson, for me, was easily a top 5 receiver in the Canadian Football League 2019. Looks like his targeted touch percentage was around 18% of Edmonton's pass targets. What you had for Walker in Toronto, and we all know the ups and downs of that passing attack in 2019, it was status quo, kind of average when it comes to the production grade. But the usage was lower than Ricky Collins, Kyron Moore, Greg Ellingson, Armonte Edwards, Lamar Durant, Eric Rogers, Braylon Addison, Shaq Evans, Geno Lewis, Reggie Begelton, Naaman Roosevelt, Brandon Banks, and Brian Burnham. So for me, I'm like, I know he's going to get more touches. They're going to have more throws in general to give out because of the style that Elizondo, I think, is going to play alongside Trevor Harris. It's a fun combination. I just don't know if Tavon Smith, who for me was in the below average targeted touch percentage and below average production grade, if he can get up there and be a Posey, then I'm in. But if Posey does what he did with Montreal 2 years ago, then I think Hamilton's got that one locked down.
Yeah, I looking at Walker from 2019, Toronto was just so bad on offense, and the throws he got were so bad on offense. About 60% of them, we judge them as accurate, and that is a terrible, terrible low percentage. If you're not, I mean, it's expected by some quarterbacks, but I don't think a guy like it didn't nearly. Let's say it this way: I wouldn't let 2019 scare me off of the greatness of Darrell Walker. So that to me is why they get just by like this much, because Hamilton is killing it in that category too.
No, it is interesting though, DT, when you look at the receivers here, when I'm looking at Armonte Edwards, Greg Ellingson, and Darrell Walker, who are all now in Edmonton, those three are very close together on this chart that I put together at the end of the 2019 season. That tells me the balance between those three guys is going to be really difficult to defend. And it'll be an interesting study in 2021 in whether three receivers equally dispersed, getting a lot of touches, catching a lot of balls, throwing the ball a lot with what we think Edmonton's going to do with Elizondo, can that beat out a team like BC, which is playing the superstar game of Mike Riley, Brian Burnham? Because yes, BC has other things in place, but if you really look at their passing attack, it's singular, and then everything else kind of fans out off of that. I think Edmonton is going to feel a lot like Ottawa did when they had 4,000-yard receivers. Because when they had that group, it was just you had no idea which level to defend, because Sinopoli was doing his thing underneath. You got Chris Williams stretching the field. You got Ellingson being vertical to the field side. And as a safety, you're trying to decide which direction do I turn and run, especially when Trevor Harris is giving you those quick eye stares, little half pump and flipping his hips back the other direction and taking a shot. Edmonton has the personnel to be able to do that, maybe even better than Hamilton does, honestly, because Hamilton, they play a different style of offensive passing game. It's a little bit more screen game. It's a little bit more throwing the corner ball. It's less of let's run vertically here and challenge you every single time we take a shot on 2nd and 7+.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Those Ottawa teams were something to the weapons they had go through there. I look at Armonte could be Sinopoli. Yes. Could Darrell Walker fill in for a Deontay Spencer, Chris Williams? Totally different kind of dude. But yes, that'd be really nice. And if Trevor Harris throws the ball 700 times, whatever, goodness knows how many passes Trevor Harris would throw over an 18-game season, it would be an amazing number. And there could be 100 catch and 1,000 yards for everybody in Edmonton if we get a full season going.
Can you imagine if Elizondo came back and in a full season he had 3 more guys in a single season be 1,000-yard receivers? Like coming back from the XFL after what he did with the Red Blacks there offensively, just to be able to say like, oh yeah, I can still do this whenever I want. I can get 3,000-yard receivers. But I do know as well that Tommy Condell, I think it was on Twitter a while back, Devere Posey said like, I want to be a 1,000-yard receiver. And somebody, a Ticats fan, quote tweeted it and said, is this possible? Could it be Banks, Addison, and Posey all 1,000 yards? And could we get this done in Hamilton? It'd be the first time in X amount of years or ever. And when they said that, Tommy Condell responded and he said, I can't wait for the challenge of making this happen. So he was openly just saying like, I'm in, let's find the balance while also having the explosive ability. So that's going to be a fun one. I look forward to going back and checking the audio on that conversation. Hopefully when we get to mid to late October and we're heading towards the playoffs, and we'll see how these groups fared. Let's look at the running back room. This for me was the tough one when it came to elite versus well-rounded. What do you got on your end for running backs as best positional groups going into 2021?
I'm trying to think why this is hard for you. I can only think of one other team that might factor in. I went with, we talked about elite versus depth, and honestly, in my mind, there's only one running back in the Canadian Football League that really, truly makes a difference. And for me, it's William Stanback. So Montreal, to me, is the number one team for running backs. Stanback is such a monster, fast and huge and yards after contact, just crushing people all over the place. You take any American in behind him. Cameron Artis Payne can be his backup. And if William Stanback is healthy, there's no one like him in the Canadian Football League. And sure, Winnipeg did different things with Andrew Harris, and we can talk about why I didn't pick Winnipeg when you tell me that Winnipeg was the team you picked. But William Stanback is such a monster at the Canadian Football League level. I'm honestly surprised that he ended up not sticking with the Vegas Raiders. I just figured he was that kind of a back. 3.8 yards after contact is an incredible number, and that is what he put up in 2019. He only had 2.2 yards before contact, and the Cat ended up with more than 6 yards a carry. William Stanback, Montreal. We're only talking about running backs, not the run game as a whole, because I have concerns about Montreal up front. But as far as running backs, I am valuing what I think is the super elite talent in the Canadian Football League, and I go Montreal here.
You don't got to convince me on William Stanback. I watched him live in week 4 against the Ticats go for like 200 yards and just consistently stiff arm dudes and run around dudes and run through dudes. And so I've seen it live. I know what he's about, and I agree with you on everything that you just said there. The one that jumped out to me, and I'll just bounce across the league on this, they're probably not going to get enough touches in the backfield in BC because Mike Riley's there, and it's not like you're paying a quarterback that much to hand it off and watch people. But Shaq Cooper getting some run on his own in a spot where John White had a decent run in 2019, that intrigues me because Shaq Cooper working alongside CJ Gable or replacing CJ Gable at times due to injury in Edmonton was really, really effective, I thought. And getting him a spot where he can own it, and then having a good buddy of mine, Wayne Moore, who's a backup there, primarily special teams, but he might get some power runs as well, and being able to mix that in. For Edmonton, what is James Wilder Jr. going to be? Because when he's at his best, he's one of the best in the CFL. Right there, I would say, with Stanback for physicality and catches out of the backfield. I don't know what to expect with Edmonton when we're talking about a triple-headed monster of receivers that they have there in Ellingson and Edwards and Darrell Walker. I'm really not thinking all that much about Calgary. It's a bit of a mute point for me. Saskatchewan, we know what William Powell is about. I view it the same way as I do when it comes to Andrew Harris, which is elite top-end talent, and everything behind it doesn't really matter. But what puts me over the top for Winnipeg is that I think we looked at it as, well, if Andrew Harris gets dinged, on top of being a top-end talent, that it's Johnny Augustine in behind there. And not a lot of people, I think, realize how good Johnny Augustine was when he was 12 or realize his value as a national backing up. But before he cracked his ankle, Brady Oliveira was amazing in his rookie year for Winnipeg as a guy that's a natural fit there, that's a Winnipeg native, that was slotted in behind Andrew Harris, that it seemed like there was a little bit of magic that was sprinkled in on those guys where it's like two Winnipeg kids getting after it in the backfield plus Johnny Augustine. And he's going to come back from that ankle, and I hope that he's going to be back to full strength. He's certainly had enough time to get his body right. But Andrew Harris, on top of running the rock, to me, and again, I don't know what Buck Pierce is going to look like compared to Paul Appelese as of right now for the way they're going to design this. But the targeted touch percentage on running backs, every year I put it together for running backs alone, and the top end of the chart, because there's no point going any further, is always 32%. If you're getting 32% of your team, 1/3 essentially of your team's targets, that's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen. And the chart, the reason I don't go past 32% is because there's nobody up there except Andrew Harris, who was always at like 34. And that's the thing, is because he's able to factor in with the screen game and the dinks and dunks. And it was the things that were so effective. If you look at the Zach Collaros target chart from 2019 Grey Cup, Andrew Harris, not only running the ball, but being able to be that short outlet into the weak side, usually the left, into the boundary, shallow from 5 yards, not to mention catching that ball vertically from Strevler for a touchdown. I know that's an anomaly statistically, but he just does so much, man. I don't know how else to write it up and to write it off and say, well, I could make the argument for this or that. Stanback, I totally get. But for me, in the CFL, in such a pass-heavy league, I trust Andrew Harris, knowing the spots to get to, trusting his ability to find those spots and to still be athletic and productive. And if they start to mix in Olivier and get a little bit younger with that spot as well, not that you're trying to take reps away from Harris, but they're really not going to drop off that much, I don't think, because I really like his game as well.
As I watch more and more, I find myself more and more falling in love with Andrew Harris for all things you mentioned, but I'm not sure there's anybody smarter at picking up blitzers than Andrew Harris from the backfield in the Canadian Football League. And I don't know how much I believe that's a real big, important thing, but football coaches tell me we need running backs to do this. So I'm going to fully trust them. And he just seems so smart back there as well. Cause he's coming on a decade of experience in the Canadian Football League, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, that is wild.
Yeah.
Let's go on. Yeah, go ahead there.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I like – you named a couple of guys which helped me further my running backs don't matter argument.
Yeah.
That is prevalent in football. But as Andrew Harris had his 2-game suspension, they were the 2 games home and home with the Riders. Right. And Johnny Augustine did not miss a beat in that offense. Augustine averaged 6.4 yards a carry in the season. Harris, 6.0. And you go, wow. Okay, I think Andrew Harris is special. Okay, either Johnny Augustine is also special, or maybe it doesn't matter as much. And Shaq Cooper, same thing. He goes in for CJ Gable, does a little better than Gable, and then Edmonton lets him walk. Of course, they bring in James Wilder, which is going to be a 1,000-yard rusher in an 18-game season. But those, I was very happy you brought up 2 guys that helped me further my. Even though Andrew Harris is phenomenal and a first-team All-Star, I can't believe people didn't vote him a first-team All-Star. Johnny Augustine filled that hole more than admirably in 2019.
We've talked a lot of Ticats as well in this podcast, just because they've got some positional groups, DBs and linebacking group and all the rest that are pretty special D-line up front. But it's interesting with me with the running backs, because taking a look at what they did in 2019, and it was like you're looking at it, and I remember putting it together and going, where are the yellow dots? Like, where is Hamilton on this? Like, do they have any running backs? And you realize that they were all way below league average in that targeted touch percentage. And they were all pretty much the same production grade, which goes to your point of the fact that it doesn't matter all that much who you put in or out for those spots. Tyrell Sutton was a little bit higher than Jackson Bennett, who's a little bit lower than Sean Thomas Arlington, who was a little bit less than, and you started to go through, you're like, Malik Irons is getting touches in there. And then Cameron Marshall's in there. And you're realizing there's like, oh my God, there's 5 guys and they're all the same dude and they're all getting the same production level now. Don Jackson coming in, that's supposed to change all of that. He's supposed to be the one to take the ball and run with it and be in there all the time. But
he was in a real rotation in Calgary, right? Yeah. Where they would run through guys. Kadeem Carey would get in there. Terry Williams would get in there.
Morris,
I'm missing Romar Morris would get in there as well. We need to flip the ratio. Ante Milanovic Leader is going to be our running back this week, and they would have different levels of production, but Jackson did not lead them in yards per carry this season. So again, that just all goes back to the running backs can be very replaceable, but I would kill if I was a CFL team to have the running back room from either Winnipeg or William Stanback in Montreal.
Yeah, absolutely. QBs. I went with the strength of 2 in front of me, which is in black and gold. I went Masoli and Evans just because I'm looking at this as being a 2-quarterback league at this point, and I'm not wishing injury upon anyone. But sometimes you got to be a 3-quarterback league team to be able to win the Grey Cup, as Winnipeg did with Claros and Nichols and Strevler. And I'm imagining a situation in which if somebody goes down in like Mike Riley in BC, you got Nathan Rourke in there, and I might be blanking on somebody else that they have that's backing up. Will Arndt is there, yes. But I don't trust Will Arndt as much as I trust Dane Evans. If you know who the backup is in Saskatchewan as well, like
Isaac Harker and James Franklin.
Yeah, do you trust Harker more than Evans at this point? If you're a diehard Riders fan, you probably do. But for me, I trust Evans more than any backup in this league, if indeed he is deemed a backup. And Masoli, to me, at his best, we've seen how productive he can be with the tools around him.
Yeah, the only reason, and I think as far as 1-2, confidence in your backup, it's probably got to be Hamilton. Dane Evans throws a lot of interceptions, and it became a joke in our gambling. We would talk about every week. We would pick the over under for interceptions for a quarterback, and they would set it at 0.5 on Bodog. So essentially, would they throw a pick or more, or would they not throw a pick? And they would keep pricing Dane Evans to the point where you go, no, he's going to throw an interception. He threw 16 in the season, including the playoffs. And he wouldn't have like a 4 interception game. It would just be 1, 1, 0, 2, 1, 1, 1. There was always a game where he would throw a pick. So I hope he's able to clean that up. I don't know if he can rise to be the level of a starter, which is what I would want to see. I ended up I really had to kind of bat it back and forth about how much I cared about the elite top end and then the depth at quarterback. So I ended up I thought, okay, well, top end is going to matter to me because it's quarterback. And no matter what you do, only one quarterback's playing at a time. So I ended up with BC and Calgary.
Yeah.
And you look at their backups and you go, okay, on a percentage basis, what's the probability that their backups end in the game? Well, Mike Riley is made of adamantium. And last we saw Bo Levi Mitchell, he was very clearly quite injured because I think his completion percentage was 60 or 61. His accuracy was awful from a grading perspective. He was very clearly injured. As their backups, I'd rather have Dakota Prukop in Calgary than Will Arndt in BC, because Arndt actually, let me make sure I have this right before I save it.
That's an interesting one to me that you went with Prukop over Arndt, because I mean, Ottawa, obviously 2019, their passing game was abysmal, but Arndt showed a couple of flashes, but he made a lot of very, very rookie mistakes. Not to say that Evans didn't at that point, or that Prukop didn't at times, but I mean, Prukop did seem to play faster, if that counts for anything, in Toronto. Like his processing speed at the line of scrimmage, his willingness to take off with the ball. There was just a lot of hesitancy in the pocket, I thought, from William Arndt, and even the pick six that he threw, I think, against Montreal at home for the Red Blacks in 2019, where he was getting into the game and it's week 20 or 21, and one of his first throws goes the other direction, and then he comes in, and it felt like the entirety of the rest of week 21 second half was checkdowns, crossers, not pushing the ball vertically. Let's get out of here, everybody healthy kind of thing. This has been a bad year. Let's just finish this out. So he was put in a bad situation. But yeah, Prukop versus Arndt is an extremely niche but fun conversation, I would say.
It is. When I started pulling up the numbers, Will Arndt's numbers kind of came out a lot like Johnny Manziel's numbers. And that absolutely terrified me because they've had the same number of attempts in the CFL. And their completion rate is actually two numbers just transposed. And they both have more interceptions than touchdowns. And Manziel just invited you to get quarterback pressure. It's like, yeah, just come get me and I'll figure something out. And he didn't. And that was, it gets to be, I feel like Dakota Prukop has more experience, but he's only thrown 41 passes in the Canadian Football League, which over 3 seasons is not a ton. So I like Michael O'Connor. I love the story, but ultimately, Mike Riley is Wolverine. I got to go BC as far as quarterbacks. That's just got to be, because I'll always go back to the story, and I forget. It might have been Sam Monson, who's one of the guys on the PFF podcast. He may still have it pinned to the top of his Twitter. He was talking about the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis when Peyton Manning was the quarterback, and they said, "Well, why don't you ever let your backup quarterback get reps?" And he said, "Because if 18 goes down, we are effed, and we don't practice being effed." I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. No, I don't want Mike Riley out of the game ever. If we're up 40, yes, but Mike Riley, I want him to take 1,000 snaps next season, and I know he's going to be accurate, and I know he's going to hang in there under pressure, and I know he is going to be, getting a little long in the tooth, so less of a running threat as it goes along. To me, it's Mike Riley, and if it gets down to the backup, we'll figure something out in my mind.
That goes with my theory that he could break the 7-13 from Matt Dunnigan as well in 2021. So I'm with Mike Riley staying on the field and getting every opportunity to do that. Last one for you. I'm just going to give this one to you, DT. I want your take on special teams. This is something that you take a very close eye at. I will be surprised if you go away from Calgary here, even with Rob Maver not in. I think it probably would have been Medlock if we had him signed back up, and it was straightforward. It's going to be weird if Winnipeg hits week 1 and Medlock's not in a uniform. That's going to feel very strange to see a Bombers kicker trot out there that isn't wearing Medlock's jersey. But Hamilton, Hairolahu got waived by the Carolina Panthers the other day. He's probably going to get another look in and around the NFL. But where are you going here with your special teams unit as a whole?
Oh, and you nailed a bunch of them. If Medlock was back, it's Medlock, because that guy's the best kicker in the history of the league for me. Real good punter as well, real smart punter. Calgary, if it was Maver, I'd probably go there because I have a lot of love for Rene Paredes and Ronnie Peffer, who's going to be the kicker there. Ronnie, I had to go back through his numbers just before this as we prepped it. When you look at Ronnie punting in plus territory in his career, he's below average at that. And Calgary asked that of Rob Maver so many times that if they plan to keep doing that, if they plan to keep that a part of Dickinson's strategy, Pepper's going to have to figure that out and improve at it dramatically. I think he's, what was the number? About 2 yards below average per punt in plus territory for his career. Pardon me, 3.5 yards below average per punt in a plus territory in his career, which is a rough number. Maver was 1.5 yards better than average in that time. This actually surprised me to get there, but the best special teams for me is the Ottawa Redblacks. It's Ottawa. Richie Leone has everything I want in a punter. That guy's got a monster leg, and he's good in plus territory. Richie gives me what I want. Lewis Ward, I mean, I couldn't believe he was 8 of 9 on converts last time out, but Lewis, he wasn't in 2019, what he was in 2018 when he hit all those kicks in a row. But that cat started making field goals over 50 yards. He was the 3rd most valuable kicker in the CFL behind Medlock, behind Sean White. He was this close to, 4, but this close to Sean White for 3rd place. It's Ottawa, and I can't believe I'm saying Ottawa. And maybe I should ding them a little bit because they use an American spot to get Leone on there. But that guy is so good. Yeah. He is just fantastic. Punting the football, and he went to Houston, and I have Houston in the pool for the NCAA tournament, so I feel like we're bonded in that. Where was he? Yeah, 3.5 yards above average per punt last season. Haralahu was next, a full yard shorter, and I just think the combination of those two is fantastic. So I can't believe that in the best in the league, I picked a team I think that's going to win 3 games this year.
Yeah, it is amazing. But at the same time, like, they've got solid coaching there as well when it comes to special teams. And LaPolice obviously cares about that part of the game, despite being an offensive guy. He understands its value in the CFL from his time bouncing around being a head coach or a coordinator. I was just thinking about how long you would have to have Lewis Ward playing in order to catch Louis Pasaglia. And you would have to, I did the math on this at the top of my head. So he played from 76 to 2000, did Louis. So that means that you're looking at a 24-year career here, correct? Which means that if you started in 2018, we're going to 38, and then we're tagging 4 more years on. So 2042 is when Lewis Ward would have to play till in order to have the same longevity that one Louis Pasaglia had, which, hey, I'm here for, Lewis. I mean, if you want to play in Ottawa for the next 22 years, I think everybody in Ottawa will still applaud you when you go. Imagine he was just out there, 2042, knocking down 50 straight, like just kick after kick after kick. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, man. Yeah. 55 of 58 in 2018 is a fantastic number for Lewis Ward. Yeah, he was struggles with the converts a little bit. Gosh, what is he now? 26 of 32 for his career. Should be 90% in that, but hopefully that'll right itself. And yes, the Ottawa Redblacks, to me, have the best specialists in the CFL. Shout out to Calgary because, yeah, like you mentioned, Rene Paredes, Ronnie Peffer deserves some love as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I got a lot of love for those guys as well. And all the special teams coordinators as well. Like, we didn't even factor them into the conversation here, but when I'm looking at what Jeff Reinbold does creatively with special teams, and when you're thinking about Mark Killam and what he does in Calgary, and Mike O'Shea's influence and what they do out there in Winnipeg, it's like there's a lot of people who know how important this stuff is to what the Canadian game is, and we hope will continue to be moving forward, as we have discussed. And I'm sure as DT is getting tired of discussing on the sports cage, which you can hear out there in Regina. Anytime you so choose, let people know the timing so that they can go and check you out, so they can get all this type of goodness on there every weekday.
Yeah, Monday to Friday. So it's 4 to 6:30 Saskatchewan time. Time change. That means it's 6 to 8:30 Eastern and 3 to 5:30 Pacific time. Central time, figure it out for yourself because that's too many numbers for me. Yeah. But yeah, 4 to 6:30, all the great CFL content. Plus, hey, super handsome Marshall Ferguson every Tuesday.
There you go. At 4:30, that's when I go on. Regina time is 4:30, so 6:30 Eastern if you want to hear that every week on Tuesdays. Coming up for you on tomorrow's edition of All Canadian, Wade Sanketta and Connor O'Neill catching up with somebody from your neck of the woods. It is Coach McConkey who is going to be joining them
Nice.
on All Canadian this week. And I have to admit that I don't know much about Coach McConkey out there at Regina. And the guys texted me and they said, hey, we wrapped up with Coach McConkey. We pre-taped the interview from the University of Regina. And I said, awesome. How was he? I'm not super familiar. And they responded, Connor responded, dude, he's 31 years old. He's not even 10 years removed from being a wide receiver himself at UR. Super interesting interview. And then I responded, damn, he's basically me. How am I unemployed and he's a head coach? Just a total different end of the spectrum there, which I have to leave you with this story as well, because remember when I mentioned to you the app Memo, where I was doing the $1 video shout outs to people, whatever, for fun. I ended up, I didn't want to mention the person's name. And part of it was because I didn't actually have their full information when I didn't give them the full shout out. But I did get an email the other night that totally came out of left field, and it was sent into cfperspective.com for me to be able to enjoy, which I was very thankful to be able to get this. And it was about this story that I had told you before about doing this shout out and completely botching everything that went with, being able to give somebody the quick love that they wanted in a memo shout out. I forgot the person's name. I didn't say it correctly, all the rest. So I got an email the other day from Paul Dobrowski. I'm going to botch his name as well. Paul Dobrowski. There we go. Nailed it. He says, hey, Marsh, I'm the guy that you referenced on the breakdown last week on March 9th. I gave you, he said, I gave you 5 stars on a memo review, even though you botched the video. Just wanted to say that the shout out made a lot of people happy. Before your podcast, I sent the video to all my buddies who are Ticat diehards. The email was titled The Marshall Ferguson Screw Job. In the email, I went off about how you messed up the video and then proceeded to screw me out of my coffee money. When some of these guys heard you tell the story to DT on the breakdown because they were listening, they were on the floor in tears. Although we may be a group of university-educated guys, deep down, we're a bunch of idiots who love a good story, and now I have a lineup of buddies who want a memo message from you. Looks like that Swedish animal sanctuary will be rolling in loonies for the next little while. Thanks for being a great sport, having fun, and your support of Canadian football. That is, again, from Paul Dobrowski, that is checking in with us there. So thank you to him for listening, and thank you, as always, to DT for being a part of the program as well. At TSN_Marsh, at DTonSC. He's on the sports cage. I'm in my basement, and we will talk to you coming up next Wednesday.